On June 26, 2020, 73-year-old Karen Garner, who suffers from dementia and sensory aphasia, which impairs her ability to communicate and understand, attempted to leave a Walmart in Loveland, Colorado, carrying $13.88 of items she had not paid for when she was stopped by store employees. Ms. Garner attempted to hand over her credit card to pay for the items, but the employees refused to allow her to pay and took the items back. Ms. Garner left the store, and a Walmart employee then called the Loveland Police Department to report the supposed theft.
Now, this lady, I understand, walked out of a Walmart without paying. It was $13, all right, which is not that much. But she still offered to pay it, right, when she was caught, even though she was being a little bit evasive. But they still wanted to call the cops on her for some reason. Like, I understand maybe she was a little bit evasive, maybe pissed them off, but have some sympathy. She's an elderly lady. Like, some of them are a little bit out of it.
Officer Austin Hopp responded to the call and tracked down Ms. Garner as she was walking home on the side of the road. Officer Hopp pulled up behind Ms. Garner with his lights on, and when she did not stop, he stopped his vehicle and approached her.
Alright, let's stop, ma'am. I don't think you want to play it this way. Ma'am, please, stop. You want to stop with lights on, siren? Stop. You just left Walmart.
Look at her reaction.
Do you need to be arrested right now? No. Okay. Let's stop.
After failing to effectively communicate with Ms. Garner, Officer Hopp grabs her and throws her to the ground in an attempt.
This lady, you can kind of tell she's out of it. Listen, this really irks me because my grandmother had dementia, right? She had Alzheimer's, whatever you want to call it. It's the memory loss thing, all right? And I lived through this. And seeing her reaction right now, that's exactly how my grandmother reacted. Notice how she wasn't like violent or anything. She was like not even kind of aware of what was happening, right? And this guy, instead of like standing in front of her or trying to find a more peaceful way to stop her, she walks away from him and he grabs her arm in such a stern way that this is not gonna end good, right? Why would you resort to this instantly instead of like assessing the situation that it's like an old lady, and if you just look at her and the way she's reacting, you would think this kind of situation would requires a little bit of more being more careful, but having a little bit more tact. But instead he's treating her like he would like any other normal criminal. This is strange.
To restrain her, Ms. Garner, visibly confused, repeatedly tells Officer Hopp that she's going home as the two engage in a brief scuffle. Eventually, Officer Hopp is able to place Ms. Garner into handcuffs and lead her back to his patrol car.
Right now you're resisting, which is not going to fly with me. And before that, you tried to steal from Walmart. And they caught you and took the stuff back. I'm not going. Why are you fighting with me?
Oh my God, stop. Oh my God, her tone reminds me so much of my grandma, bro. This really irks me. If you can hear her tone, it's not even aggressive. She's just confused. She's like, I just want to go home. She doesn't know what she did wrong. And listen, once a person has dementia like this, and she also had another mental illness which doesn't let her to articulate herself that well. A person with dementia is not going to tell you, listen, I have dementia. Sometimes I forget about stuff. I'm not doing this consciously. They're not going to be that articulate, right? Just from her tone. Like I said, reminds me of my grandpa because they don't know what's going on. They just want to, like she says, I just want to go home because that's the only place that she probably knows where she's at. When you have dementia, it's so hard. Honestly, I lived through it, and it was mentally scarring for me, just to live through it, through my grandma. Imagine what it was for her. Imagine what it is like to live. You don't know the moment. You can't live in the moment because you can't remember anything. You don't know what happened before. So you're just kind of lost all the time. And one of the few places that you know is your home. That's what she says. I just want to go home. And look at this guy. He has like no mercy for her. Like, she's not like a regular criminal. Doesn't he notice that? Like, he seems a little bit uncaring. Like, he doesn't care. She's treating her again. He's treating her like she's a normal criminal, and that's just not the case. Bro, oh my God.
Are you finished? We don't play this game. You understand me?
Jesus Christ.
If you try to kick me, oh, this is gonna be bad.
Oh. Wait, stop. Now listen, I don't want to come off as a cop hater or even like I'm hating this guy. All right? If you look at it from his perspective for a second, this lady doesn't seem that much out of it. He just kind of knows that she's resisting arrest. So he's applying force. The problem is that he's applying more force and more force, hoping that it's going to subdue her, right? It's going to put her in a submissive situation. But because of her mental illness, because of the dementia, she's not recognizing that. She's not recognizing the gravity of the situation. And maybe you would think that he would be aware of that, but he's not. You know what I mean? All he sees is like a lady resisting arrest. And mind you, even if that's the case, she's still an elderly lady. You can't be that rough with her. Honestly, that's just how it is. You know what I mean? There's ways to stop her without resorting to this. This is the easiest way to do it, mind you, but also, considering the situation, it's also not the most tactful way to handle this situation. And this is all for $13 that she wanted to pay, and they didn't let her pay. Because again, from another perspective, if you don't know that she has dementia, she just seems like a criminal that's evading you, being very evasive. You know what I mean? But at the same time, she's not arguing with them. She's not violent. She's not showing any really signs of like verbal confrontation with them because she doesn't really know what's going on. And that maybe should be a sign that you should handle this differently.
Shortly after Officer Hopp was able to gain control of Ms. Garner, Officer Daria Jalali arrives on the scene.
Yeah, then
and the
his
two officers
partner
once
arrived.
again force Ms. Garner to the ground.
There we go.
I understand they have to use some amount of force
Sit down.
in a case like this,
Sit down.
but not excessive force.
Sit down.
Look at this.
In you go.
Do not hook onto him.
I'll come on the other side and grab her.
That old lady must be so confused. This is so heartbreaking, man.
What's that?
Where's your sergeant?
Huh? Who's my sergeant?
Yeah.
Okay, well, first, I can tell you that. Sergeant Metzler, he's at the police department. You can go talk to him if you have an issue.
Yeah, give me your car so I can put a report.
Okay.
I see you there, how you throw the little kid.
Little kid?
Well, I don't
He's
know
not a
if
little
he's
kid. And this
He
is what happened.
was just...
Now this guy is passing by and he sees what's happening, right? So he confronts the cop, which is a good thing that he did. And the cops goes talk to him, and he's like, "Little kid? No, I'm not aggressing on a little kid." Which again, he conveniently omits that he's doing this to an elderly lady. You know what I mean? And this whole situation, he doesn't treat her like an elderly lady. Now you would think that different kind of perps or different kind of criminals, right, would warrant for you to act differently on each case, depending on their age, depending how much of a threat they are, depending on how aggressive their behavior is. But this guy, he's not doing that. He's just treating her like he would like any other normal criminal. I guess even a more violent criminal. Or it just doesn't make any freaking sense what he would be this extreme.
Just walk in and I see you how you grab him.
Stole from Walmart and refused to stop, refused to listen to lawful orders, and to fight me. This is what happens when you fight the police. I have to use force to safely detain her. That's what this is. This isn't just some random act of aggression.
Officer Jalali assists Officer Hopp in restraining Ms. Garner's feet and placing her in the patrol vehicle, after which a concerned citizen confronts Officer Hopp about his conduct. Although Officer Hopp informs the citizen that he was within his authority to use force against Ms. Garner, his conduct almost certainly violated department policy, Colorado
it's a
law,
little
and
extreme.
the U.S. Constitution. Quote, a peace officer is justified in using reasonable and appropriate physical force upon another person when and to the extent that he reasonably believes it necessary to effect an arrest. When courts determine whether an officer's use of force is quote-unquote reasonable under both Colorado law and the Fourth Amendment, they review the totality of the circumstances, focusing on three factors identified by the Supreme Court in the 1989 case of Graham versus Connor. Now, quoting, the severity of the crime at issue, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officers
Exactly,
or
that's
others,
what I've been
and whether he
saying.
is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight. While it technically could be argued that Ms. Garner was attempting to evade arrest by slowly walking away from Officer Hopp in her confusion, the first two Graham factors clearly weigh against the use of force in this situation. Ms. Garner was accused of the attempted theft of Pepsi, a candy bar, a t-shirt, and some shout wipe refills, which is a petty offense in Colorado.
Which she offered
and as an
to pay.
elderly woman with dementia who was 5 feet tall, weighed approximately 80 pounds, and was simply trying to walk home, she clearly posed no threat to anyone's safety.
I don't know if you realize that.
Yeah, but the way that I see it from over there, I was like, that's not...
But you see, you don't know the whole situation. That's the thing.
Yeah, but it's like...
But knowing the situation, do you feel differently now?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
But, like seeing it from there, that guy just walking...
Yeah, I get that. I get that. So when I went to go grab her and talk to her, she started running, leaving, pulling away from me, trying to fight me.
That's the thing, I didn't see it running,
Exactly. So before you go to a snap judgment...
Now, here's the thing. And this is, I know there's a lot of people with an anti-cop sentiment. I mean, I'm not particularly fond of cops, but I don't hate cops or anything like that. But there's a very tricky line when it comes to cops. Or most professions, I would say, honestly. Because it all depends on their personal judgment and their personal mood. Right? Well, you know what I mean? If a cop is having a bad day or whatever, he might be more aggressive to you. If that's his mindset or whatever. There's no really... There's a general guideline on how should they behave. But it's all based mainly on a personal level. You know what I mean? How about how they react to you? And a cop could be lenient to you, or he could be an asshole to you. You know what I mean? And they both fall along the legal parameters for the most time. Although in this case, I don't think this is quite legal. And that really sucks. That's what makes a lot of people at the core have an anti-sentiment against cops or about, people in positions of power in general. That they can abuse that power easily if they want, if they're in a bad mood, if they're petty, if they just have a toxic mindset. When ideally, people in these positions of power should be borderline saints. You know what I mean? They should be exemplary people, not your average day kind of people that would take out their mood on somebody else. They should be exemplary people that should recognize that they have to be above that because they're in a position of power, especially if you're a cop and your job is to protect and serve. Ideally, you would have to have that sort of mentality. Granted, you should be violent when you need to be violent and apply force when you need to apply it. But when you don't, you shouldn't resort to that just immediately. You know what I mean?
You gotta get all the facts.
Right here,
I get that.
I see him walking right there, you pull over.
I gotta deal with this. You hang tight, okay?
Get your feet in the car.
Alright. Okay, let me see your feet.
Credit card.
We'll get it.
My credit card.
Dude. I feel super bad for this already. She must be so confused.
Karen, I got your credit card, okay? It'll go with you. What's your date of birth, Karen?
Credit card.
I have it. You will have it with you. I will not lose it, I promise. What's your date of birth, Karen? What's your date of birth? Okay.
The Officers attempt to ascertain Ms. Garner's identity by asking her when she was born, but she refuses to engage with the officers. Throughout the interaction, it does not appear that any of the officers even consider the possibility that Ms. Garner was mentally unstable, despite the obvious symptoms of dementia she exhibits. The Loveland Police Department policy on interaction with persons suspected of suffering from mental illness states that, quote, department members are not expected to act as mental health clinicians, make diagnoses, or provide medical or psychiatric advice, but they should be aware of commonly encountered behaviors associated with mental disorders. The policy identifies dementia as one of the mental disorders that police officers often encounter, lists disorientation, regression, memory loss, and disordered thinking and speech as typical symptoms that officers should be aware of, and explains that, now quoting, when encountering a person exhibiting signs or symptoms that may indicate the person is suffering from a mental illness, enforcement personnel should attempt to establish a sincere relationship with the individual, while maintaining the safety and security of all persons involved.
Yes, you should not resort to violence.
Policy, officers should also model calm behavior and non-threatening body language.
Oh my
it
God.
is evident from the body camera footage that Officer Hobb
exactly what I've been saying.
Noticed the clear signs of mental impairment in Ms. Garner's behavior, or intentionally violated this policy in his interactions with her.
Negative, sorry. I got nothing else. It's just from a credit card she has. Golly, she's probably like 4'10", 5 foot, maybe like 100 pounds. Hey. Let's get her down to the station. Okay, we don't need to wait for the fella? No, we can see what I mean, we know what's said. She stole some stuff, and they caught her before she left and got it back when she ran out. So we have the... And you contacted her for that? And then she resisted. So we're good either way. Either way, she's going. All right.
Oh my God.
They decide not to prosecute, I don't care. Cool. Okay, we'll head down there.
Sergeant Philip Metzler tells Officer Hopp that Ms. Garner is going to be charged with resisting arrest and obstructing a peace officer regardless of whether the Walmart employees decide to prosecute her for attempting to shoplift. Although laws vary from state to state, in Colorado, individuals can still be found guilty of resisting arrest when they are not convicted of the charge they were being arrested for. However, if charges were pursued against Ms. Garner, she would have a strong argument that she was acting in self-defense, as a court would likely conclude that Officer Hopp was using unreasonable and excessive force. Additionally, Ms. Garner's mental condition could serve as another defense if charges were filed against her.
I was going to pay for it, but you didn't.
After the officers brought Ms. Garner to the police station, she was carried inside, handcuffed to a bench, and left there for several hours without medical care. As a result of Officer Hopp's use of force, Ms. Garner suffered a fractured and dislocated shoulder, a bloody nose, scrapes to her face, and contusions to her knees. She was also diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder following the incident and continues to suffer debilitating physical pain in her shoulder, arm, and wrist.
Stop. Dude, this triggers me so badly because I lived through this with my grandma. All right, and even though look, just look at her shoulder, a bunch of injuries that were so unnecessary to that poor old lady. And like I said, having lived through this really triggers me because even if they don't remember the situation, the trauma that you inflict on them stays with them and affects their behavior. And God, dude, I have so much sympathy, and I feel so sad for somebody that goes through this. Having lived through it myself, like through my grandma, you're a person that you can't control your actions in a way. You don't know what's happening in the moment. You're trapped inside this own personal cell that you have in your mind. I can't help but to feel sad for those people and to have so much sympathy for them because it's so awful. And it's an elderly lady, for crying out loud. Even if you're not a cop, I mean, granted, to me, it's really easy for me to spot the signs because I lived through something like this. But just by the notion of knowing that it's an elderly lady and that they have mental conditions, that a lot of these elderly people have been a little bit abandoned by their families, and they have to be self-sufficient in the world. And some of them are not equipped, like this lady. Like, where is this lady's family if she has some? Like, if you have a family member with Alzheimer's or dementia, they cannot be living on their own. They're not self-sufficient enough to look after themselves. And situations like this happen, right? And then you got the cops, which are the ultimate line of defense, I guess, to deal with this sort of thing. And even then, they're not prepared for this either. Like, this is just such a mess, bro.
While Ms. Garner was restrained at the police station, security footage showed officers Hop and Jalali reviewing the body camera footage with community service officer Tyler Blackett, high-fiving, bragging, and celebrating the injury to Ms. Garner's arm. In his narrative report on the use of force, Officer Hop wrote that, quote, upon contact, the suspect attempted to flee the scene and was placed onto the ground to safely detain her. The suspect fought against officers continuously, and several controlling holds had to be used. The suspect sustained minor lacerations to her wrists from the handcuffs and a small laceration to her chin, despite the fact that this account was clearly contradicted by the body camera footage and Ms. Garner's actual physical condition. Multiple higher-level officers, including Sergeant Metzler, approved the use of force as, quote, necessary, reasonable, and within policy. In fact, no action was taken against any of the officers involved until Ms. Garner filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Loveland, officers Hop and Jalali, and Sergeant Metzler on April 14, 2021. Ms. Garner's attorney, Sarah Shilka, publicly released the body camera footage, and in response to national outrage over the incident, Officer Hop was placed
I don't
on
particularly
administrative
remember
leave,
hearing
and
about this
Officer
incident.
Jalali and Sergeant Metzler were reassigned to administrative duties pending an internal investigation. All three officers, as well as Officer Blackett, later resigned, and the city retained law enforcement consulting firm Hillard Hines to conduct an independent investigation of the arrest and the department's policies, practices, and procedures. On May 19, 2021, the Colorado 8th Judicial District Critical Incident Response Team concluded an investigation into the incident, and criminal charges were filed against former officers Hop and Jalali. Mr. Hop pled not guilty to all three charges and is scheduled for a jury trial in April 2022. Ms. Jalali has yet to enter a plea on the charges against her, and they remain pending. However, Loveland city leaders agreed to pay Ms. Garner a $3 million settlement on September 9th. Overall, the former Loveland officers get an F for escalating
Okay,
a
stop.
minor
I'm gonna
violation
end it
into
right
an unnecessary
here.
and
For
violent
instance of the
arrest,
video.
failing to consider.
Now, even though I'm cutting the video a little bit short, he basically reiterates everything that they did wrong and how they mishandled the situation, which I fully agree with. Now, when I saw this video, again, it made me so sad, and it irked me, it triggered me, because like I've been saying all along, I lived through this with my grandma, and for me it's so heartbreaking seeing this, and seeing all the obvious signs that this woman, an elderly woman, has been so abandoned by the world, and when she has a mental illness that she can't control. And what I mean abandoned by the world is, as where's her family? You know, why is her family still letting her go out and do the grocery shopping all by herself, when she's clearly not in a mental condition to do so? And why are the cops not recognizing that they're dealing with an elderly lady? And even though it should be part of their training, again, they're not supposed to be psychiatrists, but they need to take into account that it's an elderly lady, and when you're dealing with an elderly person, it could be common that they don't fully know what's going on. They may suffer from dementia. You can't treat them as you would like a younger criminal or something like that. You know, it all depends on their behavior. And it's so sad that this poor old lady, man, have to go through this. Now, mind you, she ended up with $3 million, which good for her. And I bet her family's gonna pay attention to her now that she has $3 million, right? Again, maybe I don't want to be so harsh on their family, because when it comes to family, I don't particularly know their situation. All right, maybe they do look after her, but she still wants to be an independent woman, and they kind of let her. But when it comes to an extreme case like this is gonna show that they can't let her do stuff on her own anymore. Either way, this was awful, bro, and it really triggered me.